Hey guys, how's it going? Master Cal here, and today I'm going to be doing the 15th video for my 2021 NFL offseason recap series, the New England Patriots. So after the Patriots failed to win the AFC East for the first time since Tom Brady tore his ACL during the 2008 season, the Patriots knew they had to make a shakeup, as the Patriots were exposed last year due to just a lack of talent, whether it had moved, whether it had retired, whether it opted out of last season because the Patriots had a lot of opt-outs, or whether it had been poached by other teams like Brady to the Buccaneers, or other teams like, say, the Dolphins, the Lions, and the Texans that had been trying to emulate the so-called Patriot way. So, and that's what the Patriots did. They infused a lot of talent in the offseason through free agency, in particular because especially offensively the Patriots had struggled to draft well. No coaching changes this offseason for the New England Patriots. So the free agents the Patriots re-signed, edge rusher Deatrick Wise signed a 4-year deal worth $22 million up to $30 million. So that's $2 million of incentives per year, and $10 million of it is guaranteed. And he's been a pretty solid guy off the edge for them against the run and against the pass, and he was kind of their primary edge rusher last year because of the injuries and opt-outs. Starting center David Andrews signed a 4-year deal worth $19 million, $6.5 million guaranteed, and it honestly strikes me as surprising that the Patriots are able to sign him for such a bargain, less than $5 million a year for a very good center. Yeah, I'd take that. He did languish on the market for a little bit before re-signing with the Patriots. I know the Dolphins had interest in him, but ultimately he wound up returning to New England. Defensive tackle Lawrence Guy signed a 4-year deal worth $11.5 million, $2.075 million of it guaranteed. So in that case, that looks more like a year-to-year kind of contract for the veteran. Cam Newton, who last year had an interesting year. I mean, he had some good games, he had some not so good games. Some people think he's washed. Some people think he still has some left in the tank. He was re-signed to a 1-year deal. It's worth $5.1 million. It's worth all the way up to $14 million. $3.5 million of it is guaranteed, and he'll have a full off season to continue to master the playbook and to get more comfortable in the system in year 2. Cornerback Justin Bethel signed a 3-year deal worth $6 million with $2.75 million guaranteed. He's a key special teamer. Safety special teamer Cody Davis was re-signed to a 2-year deal worth $4.3 million, $2.1 million guaranteed. Cornerback J.C. Jackson was brought back on a second-round level restricted free agent tender, which is $3.384 million. And Jackson has been a quality undrafted find for the Patriots since they signed him in 2018, and he's now on track to be a full-time starter and can cash in big next offseason. Pass-catching back James White was brought back on a 1-year deal worth $2.4625 million. It's fully guaranteed. There were a lot of rumors that he could jump ship to Tampa Bay to reunite with Tom Brady there, but ultimately he stayed in New England, and the Buccaneers wound up getting Gio Bernard as their pass-catching back after the Bengals cut him. Kicker Nick Folk was re-signed to a 1-year deal worth $1.625 million. It's up to $2.5 million with $1.225 million guaranteed, as he outdueled Justin Rohrwasser for the starting job last year, and he'll have a shot at being that again this year. Guard Marcus Martin was re-signed to a 1-year deal worth $1.18 million with $15,000 guaranteed. Defensive lineman Carl Davis signed a 1-year deal worth $1.0775 million with no guarantees. Backup quarterback Brian Hoyer was re-signed to a 1-year deal worth $1.075 million with $100,000 guaranteed. Offensive lineman James Ferentz was re-signed to a 1-year deal worth $1.02 million with $130,000 guaranteed. And fullback, I don't know if it's Jacob Johnson with a K. He was brought back as an exclusive rights free agent on a 1-year deal worth $850,000. Now onto the free agent signings, where things get a whole lot more interesting. The Patriots signed edge rusher Matthew Judon, former Raven, to a 4-year deal. It's worth $54.5 million, up to $56 million. $32 million of it is guaranteed, $30 million fully guaranteed at signing. And Judon has really come on the past few years for the Ravens, and he played out last year under the franchise tag. I feel like he's closer on like the solid edge rusher spectrum than the elite level of the spectrum, which is and so for this value of a contract, I think is fair. Former Titans tight end Jonnu Smith signed a 4-year deal worth $50 million, $31.125 million guaranteed, and he's been pretty solid for Tennessee throughout his entire career, as he got a lot of playing time early on because of injuries to Delanie Walker, and he's been the full-time starter the last couple of years. He will be a significant loss for the Titans. However, the counter argument has been that Smith's offensive production has not been quite worth what that contract is. So we'll see if the Patriots overpaid for Smith, who's closer to a decent, solid tight end than an elite tight end. But they didn't stop there. They doubled up on tight end, signing former Charger Hunter Henry to a 3-year contract worth $37.5 million, $25 million of it guaranteed. Now, Henry has showed a lot more upside in production than Smith has. The issue for Henry has been injuries, as he has dealt with injuries kind of throughout his career. He was healthy for the most part last year, which is a good sign, as he was the Chargers franchise player. LA elected not to franchise him again this offseason, and the Patriots scooped him up. And it sounds like the Patriots are looking to go with, to harken back to the days when they had Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez in the early 2010s with their 2 tight end offense, especially with Newton being able to get those short passes over the middle. Safety Jalen Mills, former Philadelphia Eagles, signed a 4-year deal worth $24 million, $9 million guaranteed, and he's a versatile piece that Bill Belichick likes to have. He started his career out at corner, and he shifted to safety last year for the Eagles after the Eagles elected to move on from Malcolm Jenkins, and he had a pretty decent year for them, and now he'll likely reprise somewhat of a matchup coverage guy role in the Patriots defense. Receiver Nelson Aguilar, former first-round pick of the Eagles, also a former Raider, signed a 2-year deal. It's worth $22 million up to $24 million with $16 million guaranteed. And Aguilar, he's had an up and down career thus far. His first 2 years in the league after being taken in the first round were pretty quiet. He did start to come onto the scene in year 3, which was the year the Eagles won the Super Bowl. Had another solid year in 2018. However, in 2019, his contract year, he had a really abysmal season as the Eagles struggled quite a bit that year, labored to make the playoffs, and Aguilar didn't help. He struggled with a lot of drops, and he wound up taking a veteran minimum contract with Las Vegas last offseason, and he started off slow, but he really came on as he was one of actually the better deep threats in the NFL, and so we'll see what he does in New England now. Defensive tackle Davon Godchaux, former Dolphins, signed a 2-year deal worth $15 million, $9 million guaranteed, and he's been pretty decent for the most part. He did miss about a third to a half of last season due to injury, so there's a bit of risk there, but he is a pretty solid player. Former 49ers receiver Kendrick Bourne signed a 3-year deal worth $15 million up to $22.5 million, $5.25 million guaranteed. And Bourne, he really came on in 2019, kind of taking playing time away from other receivers like Dante Pettis and Trent Taylor the past few seasons, and now and he'll have a bit of an opportunity here in New England to play a bit more. Linebacker Kyle Van Noy signed a 2-year deal worth $12 million, $6 million guaranteed. Obviously, he had been with the Patriots before. He left last offseason for the Dolphins on a 4-year contract in free agency, but Miami elected to release him just 1 year into it, and the Patriots were like, we'll take him right back. It wasn't like Van Noy was bad in Brian Flores and the Miami's defense. Like he just wasn't super great. Like he he had like he had like one, I think, 3 sack game, which kind of inflated his stats for Miami, but but um but otherwise he wasn't really much of a factor. Even like even then he did provide veteran leadership, which made it somewhat of a surprising release, and so now he's back with Bill Belichick. They signed former Jet and Colt Henry Anderson, defensive tackle, to a 2-year deal worth $7 million, $3 million guaranteed. He was a cap casualty by New York this offseason. A guy who's pretty good against the run. His best season in the league was in 2018, his first year as a New York Jet, in which he had 7 sacks. Although I guess kind of like Van Noy last year, he did have 3 sacks in one game against the Texans back in 2018, which was when their offensive line was just completely terrible. Another reunion, as center Ted Karras signed a 1-year deal worth a fully guaranteed $3 million. He was the Dolphins' starting center last year. Miami wanted to upgrade the center position, and the Patriots elected to bring Karras back. They actually signed Karras before they re-signed Andrews. And now Karras, who has been a full-time starter the past couple of years because of the injury to Andrews in 2019, or actually I should say the medical issue with Andrews in 2019 and been with the Dolphins last year, he'll now be the backup for Andrews yet again this year. Miami, after being unable to bring Andrews over to South Beach, elected to bring in former Raven Matt Skura on a bit of a reclamation project. They signed linebacker Leroy Reynolds to a 1-year deal worth $1.2125 million with $100,000 guaranteed, but they have since released him. They signed former Dolphin and Raiders linebacker Raekwon McMillan to a 1-year deal worth $1.15 million with $250,000 guaranteed. The former second-round pick fell out of favor in Miami last offseason, and he was traded to the Raiders before the start of the season. But unfortunately, he didn't do much better there, as he was unable to crack their starting lineup behind Corey Littleton, Nick Kwiatkowski, and Nicholas Morrow. And he'll get a chance to try and show what he can do in New England. Wide receiver Marvin Hall signed a 1-year deal worth $1.1275 million, $25,000 guaranteed. He spent last year between the Lions and the Browns, but Cleveland declined to tender him as a restricted free agent. He brings a speed element. Former Packers defensive lineman Montravius Adams signed a 1-year deal worth $1.095 million with $50,000 guaranteed. Former Bengals offensive lineman Alex Redmond signed a 1-year deal worth $1.08 million with $40,000 of it guaranteed. Linebacker Harvey Longy signed a 1-year deal worth $1.0575 million with $75,000 guaranteed. Longy was non-tendered by the Jets as a restricted free agent this offseason. This despite Longy stepping into the starting lineup after Avery Williamson was traded away to the Steelers in the middle of the season, and Longy actually did pretty solid for the Jets to starter, but new defensive scheme, they shifted from a 3-4 to a 4-3 under Robert Saleh. And Longy, who actually started his career with New England, now gets another shot with Belichick and the Patriots. Safety Adrian Colbert, who's played for the Dolphins, the Giants, and the 49ers recently, signed a 1-year deal worth $990,000. Swing tackle Gerald Hawkins, who former Steeler and Buccaneer, signed a 1-year deal worth $920,000. Tight end Troy Fumagalli signed a 1-year deal worth $850,000. He was non-tendered by the Broncos as a restricted free agent. Running back Tyler Gaffney signed a 1-year deal worth $660,000. Offensive lineman R.J. Prince signed a 1-year deal worth $660,000. Wide receiver Devin Ross signed a 1-year deal worth $660,000, and tight end David Wells signed a 1-year deal worth $660,000. Wells spent some time in New England's practice squad last year. For the Patriots cuts, safety Patrick Chung elected to retire, this despite him having either 3 or 4 years left on his current contract. He opted out of last season and decided to call it a career. He was probably one of the more underrated, I'd say, defensive backs in the league, as he didn't really make Pro Bowls. Wasn't known for that, but he was a key cog in those Belichick defenses. Wide receiver Julian Edelman, who was banged up a lot of last year due to a knee injury. A story came out during the offseason that Edelman, if he tried to play again this year on the final year of his deal, would not be able to because of his knee, and there would be long-term issues if he did so. And the Patriots elected to release him with a failed physical designation, and he retired the day after that. Now, because of his obvious connection with Brady and the fact that Gronk did that, there's been some speculation that Edelman could unretire and perhaps join up with the Buccaneers for one more go with Brady, but Edelman has shot that down. Although Gronk has himself said that that's not out of the question that Edelman does that. Receiver Marquise Lee, who also opted out of last season, was released. As his downward trend continues, he's been injured and hasn't played much since his breakout 2017 season with the Jaguars. Defensive tackle Bo Allen was cut. He missed most of last year due to injury and was irrelevant after the Patriots added all those defensive linemen. Fullback Danny Vitale, who also opted out last season, was released. Linebacker Cash Maluaya, who was on and off the Patriots practice squad last year. Defensive tackle Michael Barnett, who's been on their training camp roster the past year or two. He signed with the Detroit Lions, actually just this morning. Offensive lineman Najee Toran, he signed with the Washington football team. However, he has not reported to Washington's training camp for whatever reason. And then center Dustin Woodard, he was a late round draft pick of theirs in 2020. He retired. He came out of retirement and the Patriots waived him. He remains unsigned. Now the Patriots' free agent losses. By far and away their biggest departure was starting left guard Joe Thuney. He was their franchise tag player last year, one of the best guards in the game. He signed a 5-year contract with the Kansas City Chiefs. There was a lot of talk that he could go to a rebuilding team that needed offensive line help, like the Jets or the Bengals, for example, or even the Dolphins, who are obviously not, who are at this point who are on the other side of the rebuilding spectrum. But instead, he goes to a team that's been to the AFC Championship game, or the Super Bowl, I should say, the past 2 years, the AFC Championship game the past 3 years, to bolster their offensive line depth, especially since their injury-ravaged offensive line was exposed in the Super Bowl. And he did get paid. He got $16 million a year from the Chiefs. Defensive tackle Adam Butler signed a 2-year deal with the Miami Dolphins. So the Patriots and the Patriots and the Dolphins basically swapped defensive tackles in Butler and Godchow. Cornerback Jason McCourty, Devin McCourty's brother, signed a 1-year deal with the Dolphins as well. Receiver Damiere Byrd signed with the Chicago Bears. Edge rusher John Simon recently signed with the Tennessee Titans. Running back Rex Burkhead signed with the Houston Texans. Linebacker Brandon Copeland signed with the Atlanta Falcons. Safety special teamer Terrence Brooks signed with the Texans. Receiver Dante Moncrief also signed with Houston, but he has since been released with a non-football injury designation. And guard Jermaine Illuminor also signed with Miami. You can tell here Miami and Houston bring in a lot of former Patriots players. Their unsigned free agents, edge rusher Shalik Calhoun and wide receiver Quincy Adeboyeho, who was non-tendered as an exclusive Reds free agent. Patriots made several trades this offseason. First, they reacquired Trent Brown from the Raiders. The Raiders also sent him along with a 2022 7th-round pick to Foxborough, receiving New England's 2022 5th-round pick. Brown had a breakout year for the Patriots in 2018 as their starting left tackle. He left for a 4-year deal with the Raiders the following offseason to be their starting right tackle, and now 2 years later he's back with the Patriots. He restructured his contract. It's for 1 year, $9 million, up to $11 million, with $6.5 million of it guaranteed. And the reason why the Raiders moved on from Brown, he missed significant time last year because of COVID-19 and also because of injuries. And there's been talk about how his playing weight has kind of been a little bit much, which was a problem of his back in his early days with the 49ers before he got traded to New England the first time. So it's a little bit of a reclamation project, but not entirely, because Brown was still pretty solid for the Raiders last year. And he's going to be the Patriots starting right tackle this year. The Patriots then traded away right tackle Marcus Cannon, who was another one of their opt-outs last year. They traded him along with 5th and 6th round picks to the Houston Texans for 4th and 6th round picks. Cannon's play had shown some signs of decline in 2019, and especially after Michael Onwenu, his replacement in 2020, burst onto the scene. In 2020, Onwenu was no longer needed, or Cannon was no longer needed, and so he goes to Houston, where he'll hope to provide veteran leadership and show that he can still play, whether that's at tackle or at guard. Onwenu, by the way, is being kicked inside the left guard to fill the void left by Tooney's departure to allow Brown to start at right tackle. And then in a separate trade with the Texans, tight end Ryan Izzo was sent to Houston for a 7th round pick in 2022. Izzo was a draft pick at the Patriots, I think in like 2018, and he could have had an opportunity this year, the past couple of years after Gronk's retirement following the 2018 season, but he just hasn't really done anything with it, and now he heads over to Houston. As Houston as we've seen, has been willing to spend some late round draft capital to add veteran competition at some of their spots, even guys in expiring contracts like Izzo and also like Anthony Miller from the Chicago Bears. The Patriots then to their draft picks. With their 1st round pick, 15th overall, they took Alabama quarterback Mac Jones, who led them to Mac Jones, who wasn't really even being talked about as a 1st round pick prior to this season before leading the Crimson Tide to a national title. Jones received quite a bit of comparison to Tom Brady for his accuracy and lack of athleticism, and in fact, Jones did kind of copy Brady's pre-draft combine shirtless photo shoot before it, so we'll see how Jones works out for them, and he's expected to be able to challenge Cam Newton for the starting job right away out of training camp. The Patriots would trade up into the 2nd round with the Bengals, and they took fellow Alabama player, defensive tackle Christian Barmore. With the 32nd pick in the 3rd round, which was a compensatory 3rd pick for letting Tom Brady leave, they took edge rusher Ronnie Perkins. With the 15th pick in the 4th round, they took running back Ramondre Stevenson. With the 33rd pick in the 5th round, they took Michigan linebacker Cameron McGrone. With the 4th pick in the 6th round, they took safety Joshua Bledsoe. With the 13th pick in the 6th round, they took tackle Will Sherman. And with the 14th pick in the 7th round, they took wide receiver Trey Nixon. Patriots did not have a 3rd round pick in this year's draft, a regular 3rd round pick, because of Spygate 2.0 and having to forfeit that. Patriots have not signed any players to extensions. As far as injuries go, Stephon Gilmore is recovering from a quad injury that he suffered during last season. McGrone is rehabbing from a torn ACL that he suffered while in college. And Jarrett Stidham has a shoulder injury, and he's going to be out for quite some time. And that is kind of significant because Stidham is not guaranteed a spot on the roster with the Patriots bringing back Brian Hoyer. Obviously, they have Newton and Jones as the 1 and 2, or the 2 and 1, and then you got Hoyer in there, and Stidham and Hoyer would be competing for the 3 if there is a 3rd spot, and Stidham's going to lose time with that because of that injury. So now my thoughts on the offseason. So the Patriots were kind of uncharacteristic there. The Patriots are usually measured in free agency. They rarely spend big money in free agency, and when they do go after guys, they're usually guys that were released, as in guys that don't count towards compensatory picks. The Patriots are used to letting some of their guys sign big contracts elsewhere to get compensatory picks. As we've seen, the Patriots had a compensatory 3rd for losing Brady. McGrone was a compensatory 5th rounder, and the Patriots had a compensatory 4th rounder, but they had traded that to the Bengals as part of the deal to move up to select Barmore. This time around, though, signing a bunch of unrestricted free agents instead of street free agents, the Patriots are not going to be in line for and only one guy signing a really significant contract. The Patriots are not going to be in position to get compensatory picks this offseason. And again, I alluded to that before. The Patriots had just lost too much talent in 2020, whether that was free agent departures, retirements, or opt-outs. And definitely Brady's absence was a notable key, but even in 2019, Brady led the Patriots to a division title, but not enough to even win a playoff game against the 6th seeded Tennessee Titans, who had barely gotten their way into the playoffs that year. because they had clear weaknesses at skill position players and some aging defensive players as well that were exposed in that game. And would Brady have been able to even lead the Patriots to a division title last year with Josh Allen's breakout in Buffalo? That's certainly a question to have. And again, the Patriots have really struggled, especially drafting offensively. Like the only guys they've really drafted that have been successes offensively early rounds have been Deion Branch and Rob Gronkowski. And in fact, like one of their recent first round picks, N'Keal Harry, has been a bust so far. He's been a non-factor at this level, and he wants out of New England. And as of now, the Patriots have set a fourth round pick as the asking price, and I don't think any team's going to meet that, so we'll see how that resolves itself. So we'll see how the Patriots' aggressive offseason with Judon and the two tight ends and bringing back Andrews and Guy and whatnot. They did get some kind of team-friendly contracts, or ones that could be team-friendly if they're able to reprise their roles solidly, but we'll have to see. And obviously the quarterback competition is going to be one to watch. And as such, I had a lot of positions of need on the Patriots in my offseason preview video. I listed quarterback because the only quarterback they had under contract to start the offseason was Stidham, and that was definitely addressed by bringing back Newton and adding Jones. Left guard, so left guard wasn't directly like filled, but or wasn't directly addressed, but it was filled from within because the Patriots are going to shift on Wainu, who was really good as a sixth-round rookie last year at right tackle. They're going to shift him to left guard, which will allow Trent Brown to start at right tackle. So it was indirectly addressed. Center, yes, they addressed that by bringing back Andrews. Wide receiver, I'd say yeah, that was addressed. They added Bourne and Aguilar. Those guys don't really move the needle too much, but like they are better than last year's receivers, Harry and Bird and a washed up Edelman. But like at their best, those guys are like wide receiver threes. You can make an argument that Aguilar might be a guy that's on the rise, but he's been so inconsistent throughout his career, and this is already year 7, that he'll probably never be a wide receiver 1. Like he could maybe be like a mid-tier 2 at best, which I'd say for the Patriots would be fine given their tight ends going to be the focal point of the offense. But yeah, defensive tackle, yeah, that was addressed by bringing back Guy and also trading up for Barmore. And then I mentioned cornerback. That was addressed by bringing back J.C. Jackson. There was some thought that the Patriots might lose him to an offer sheet, but it doesn't sound like a team was willing to give up a second-round pick to sign Jackson, and they can wait until next year when they can sign him, and not have to give up anything to sign him. And then for secondary needs, I listed tight end, and that was certainly made a significant priority by bringing in Smith and Henry. So the Patriots weren't content to roll with last year's third-round picks Devin Ossie, and Dalton Keene as their starters. Edge rusher, yeah, they added a lot of pieces there between Judon, obviously, bringing back Wise, Perkins, Van Noy. Linebacker, I mean, that was somewhat addressed. They added a couple of veterans in free agency on close to minimum contracts and spent a late-round pick on one. And when I mentioned left tackle because of the injury concerns of starting left tackle Isaiah Wynns, the Patriots did pick up Wynn's fifth-year option, which means they are committed to him for 2022 as well, because he has been pretty good when he's been able to be on the field. The problem is he's missed significant time in all 3 of his NFL seasons. Now, the Patriots did add some insurance because if Wynn is injured, I'd have to imagine the Patriots would shift Brown over to left tackle to fill in for him. They do have a pretty good backup plan in place. Although if Brown were to deal with injuries, that would definitely be an issue there, and the Patriots hope to avoid that. So now with the Patriots' projected starters, so Jones and Newton are going to be competing for the starting job. At running back, I'm going to have Damian Harris be the guy that's in the lead there. He was kind of their number one last year, although it is a committee. Left tackle will be Wynn. Left guard on Wainu. Center Andrews. Right guard Shaq Mason. And then right tackle will be Brown. And then I'll go with the two tight ends. So it'll be Aguilar and Bourne as the receivers, Henry and Smith as the tight ends. So the Patriots have a number of different starters throughout the offense this year. For defense, I'm going to have Matthew Judon off the edge. I'll have Davon Godchaux and Lawrence Guy as the starting two defensive tackles, and then the other edge spot I think will be between Wise and Van Noy. Linebacker, I'm going to have Jawan Bentley, Dante Hightower, who's back from his opt-out last year, and then the third linebacker, I'm going to go with McMillan, although some of the Patriots' recent draft picks, like McGrone if he's healthy, or Anfernee Jennings, could push for that starting job there. Stephon Gilmore, if healthy, will be the number one corner. J.C. Jackson will be the number two. Jonathan Jones in the slot. And then safety, I'm going to go with Devin McCourty, and then I'll have Jalen Mills be the two. The Patriots might see Mills as kind of a matchup guy, though, which means that they could technically start Adrian Phillips or even Kyle Duggar next to McCourty instead, but we'll see what they do from there. So that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next off-season recap video.